Welcome back. This is the week you missed. You're probably going to have 2 weeks you missed because last week my computer broke in the last minute. Didn't upload the episode, but we do have it. So I will be uploading it. This week we got a little change of pace, a little change of how we're going to do things. I feel like the world's been coming to an end for a while. That's all we kind of talk about is things get wilder and wilder. It's important, but every once in a while it's kind of nice to have a break and have something positive to talk about. So before we even get into anything positive, I kind of started thinking about that. And basically, everything is kind of from perspective anyway. So, is positive news, whatever we bring up today, is it actually positive always? Is it positive for everyone? Is there someone else who it's negative for? And then also, what I'm curious for is like sometimes I just told you my dog got sick, and I was thinking, like, that sucks. That's negative that my dog got sick. But if you get sick and bring him to the doctor to find out of a disease that he would have died from, then isn't it kind of a positive? So like even negative things, you can kind of get some positive out of it. So I wanted to kind of just hear what you thought about that first.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's very few things in life in the world that are probably 100% positive for everyone. Now, the thing is, something that's good for many people might be bad for someone, but the person it's bad for might be someone that we all collectively think is a bad person or an asshole. So,
Right.
like, because
Good point.
I don't know, to use like an example of the Cuban Revolution, it was like that was very bad for many of the people who had to flee, who were landowners, business owners, things like that. But at the same time, in many people's perspective, those landowners or business owners were exploitative, or maybe were really mean or bad to their employees. And so something for them that was traumatizing, and they had to leave everything, and they ended up in America or other countries, and they are looking back at those people being like, that's terrible. Some of the people that probably overthrew them and chased them out were like, yeah, this is good. We're getting rid of our oppressors. And so
Yeah,
I think there's just very few things where it's like, I mean, I would struggle to even probably identify something where it's like every single person would agree that this is good news.
right.
So it is an interesting way to think about that, and I'm sure the stories we talk about will probably
Yeah.
exemplify that to some
Well,
degree. So what are you
I'm
starting?
excited to hear yours first. Let's hear yours first.
Oh, okay, fine. So it was good. I don't know if you heard Joe Biden did a interview on 60 Minutes
Yeah.
recently, and besides the fact of just being hilarious because he's Joe Biden and we live in a ridiculous time,
Yeah.
he made an offhand comment, seemingly. I don't think it was part of his prepared remarks that, hey, good news, Jeremy. Did you hear the pandemic is over?
I 100% heard that, and I definitely right away thought it was pretty interesting. I think mostly why I thought it was interesting is because there's doctors, medical experts from Philadelphia at least, who right away said, no, it's not over. Like we still have a ways to go, and we need to be careful. And to me, I hate to always be the one to like bring up these um, things that don't make sense to me because people think I'm like bashing Joe Biden. I'm not. But if that was Donald Trump, people would be like, how is this guy saying these baseless claims without going to a scientist and having Dr. Fauci verify it first? It's like you can't just say stuff like that. That's wild. Is that kind of what you were thinking? Or
Well, I mean, here's the thing, Jeremy. It's funny because I think you're like, you can't just say things. And it's like, oh no, actually you can. Like
yeah,
that is the world we live in. It's like, no. You can just say things. And like whether you're the president or whether you're just you or me, like, look, you speak confidently about anything, and like you might be able to trick some people too. But to me, I think that the reason that I'm happy about this is because, look, I think no matter where you stand on the pandemic or your cautiousness around COVID, it's pretty clear at this point that this disease is not going anywhere. I mean, 100 years from now, COVID is basically probably just going to be another version of the cold that is bopping around, and you're never going to know whether you have a cold or maybe a mild flu or COVID. It's all going to probably be sort of about the same thing. But I think that, a positive thing of this is I think this is going to be a signal to many people that were maybe on the edge of caution, or maybe were basically following or sort of restricting themselves or living a life that wasn't as fulfilling as it could be because of just like the general official stance that COVID is around. COVID is dangerous. You need to be cautious. We need to be, so on and so forth. And I think hopefully this sort of relaxing of the attitude will start letting those people, some of them be like, okay, now it's like I'm finally getting enough green lights to say I'm going to go back to normal. And one thing I saw, I don't know if it's officially been announced yet, but it's heavily rumored that Eric Adams is going to announce that they're going to be, the mayor of New York is going to announce that the New York City ban on unvaccinated student athletes is going to be lifted. And I think that's great because look, I mean, I was vaccinated. Most people I know were vaccinated, and but at the same time, for a 15-year-old healthy person, the necessity of them to get a vaccine is something that is pretty heavily debated, and you can find very informed people on both sides that they'll make very good points. And so I think if that's the case, it comes down to personal choice, and I don't think we should be forcing people of any age, frankly, to be injecting themselves with drugs. It's not to say that if you don't, you have every right. Like, look, if you don't want to
how do you feel about smallpox or like those?
I have two thoughts on that, and I was actually just going to get to that because I think it's the logical next point. Is that one? I think, look, if you don't want to vaccinate your children against smallpox or polio or whatever, that is your right. I heavily disagree with it
because polio is making like a
coming
comeback.
back.
Yeah,
don't call it a comeback.
And it's pretty on timeline with people being against vaccines, and now polio is like a thing again, and it was eradicated for a while.
Yeah, no, it's wild. But I think that, look, you can do that. But I think part of living in a free society is that you're free to make a choice, but you also are then obligated to deal with whatever the consequences of that choice are. And so if that means you have to homeschool your kids, or you only can go to a private school, that you want to deal with that, fine. Don't scream about how you're oppressed. We have these rules, and if you don't want to follow them, here are your new options. Now, also, my other thing with because I've heard a lot of people saying this, be like, well, we should require the COVID vaccine for school children, yada, yada, yada. And I'm not going to say I 100% disagree with that. The point I always make about this, and I've actually tried to find this information, I can never find a straight answer, is how long were the polio and smallpox and the other vaccines that are now required for students to attend schools, how long were they being used and how many people had taken them before they were legally required for students to enter into school? Because I don't know the exact numbers. This has been very hard for me to find, but I know for a fact that there's no way the COVID vaccine has been around as long and in use as long as probably the smallpox and polio vaccine were before they became requirements for attending school. And I'm not saying that that's some sort of like arbitrary timeline of saying, well, if the polio vaccine was used for 10 years before it was legally required for students, then the COVID vaccine has to wait 10 years. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I think before we require it, it should go through much heavier rounds of testing. And apparently this new variant booster was literally not tested on any humans. I don't know if this is like right-wing propaganda, but the thing I keep seeing is that it was literally tested on 8 mice to see if it was effective. And like, I don't know, man, that freaks me out. Like, I don't, 5 years ago, nobody trusted Big Pharma, and right now everyone's rolling up their sleeves and just being like, shove it in me, doc. Like,
I completely agree with you there. I don't know. It's difficult though. It's a difficult subject. I don't know what's best. It's really hard.
But yeah, I think I'm happy that we are at least starting to move to a point of saying, and look, whether or not it's over or not, like, I think that's obviously up for debate. And it's obviously not true. There's still hundreds of people dying of COVID each day in America, I believe, and probably thousands around the world. But at the end of the day, it's like, we cannot completely kneecap our society. We cannot continue to live in fear. We cannot do this. It is not a healthy way for society to work, and it is not a way that society will thrive. I think that,
do you think anything's going to get worse in the winter? And do you think there's ever a chance of a lockdown again from COVID or from?
I mean, your ass might get locked down up there in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's for sure.
North Carolina, there's not a chance in hell. But look, it's gonna. I'm gonna take out my magic crystal ball and predict exactly what's gonna happen, because we've seen it happen over the course of the pandemic. Numbers are going to surge in the Northeast because in the wintertime, people go inside more. And in the South, where it's now cool and people hang outside more, the numbers are maybe going to rise a little bit, but they're not going to rise as much, or maybe they'll even fall or plateau.
Mm,
We've seen this time and time again. In places where it's hot, they surge in the summer because everyone's inside because they want to stay cool. In places where it's cold, it surges in the winter because everyone's staying inside to get out of the cold. So yes, I think we're going to see a surge, but again, I think there's always this conflation with like case rates and number of cases and all this. And it's funny because at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was like, oh, it doesn't matter about the cases. It matters if our hospitals are overwhelmed. And now that hospitals aren't necessarily being overwhelmed as much because the cases are much milder. I've seen so many people focusing on look at these case numbers. They're raging out of control. And it was like, weren't you telling me a year ago that the case numbers really weren't the metric that we need to look at, that we need to be
right.
looking at hospitalizations and hospital utilization rates and things like that. So yeah, I think we're obviously going to see a surge. I think it's going to come back, and I think it's going to probably kill percentage wise less people than any other wave, and we're going to get through this thing. And hopefully, I just think that more and more people will start just realizing like, all right, it's time to get back to normal. Because I think this level of social isolation that people have been putting on themselves, I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
And even relating to remote work, I've worked remotely because I worked for myself for like 4 or 5 years now, and like, but I still socialize. I go out, I see people, and there is this sort of growing thing that's saying like, look, this work from home revolution is good, but it's also not necessarily good if you literally never leave your house. Like if
Right.
you do your job from your little, apartment pod, you get everything delivered to you, you never leave, you're afraid to go to social gatherings, you're afraid to go to weddings or birthdays. What was that?
Are you talking about me? No.
Look, I've seen your Instagram stories. You at least step foot outside.
No, I do. I certainly enjoy my alone time, but I know it's important to like be with people and do things 100%. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting too with the people going back to the office. I'm super fascinated with that of like bosses forcing people to go back. I personally think with everything, unfortunately, there's no cookie cutter saying it should be this or it's always this. I think there's some employees who are 100% as effective at home. I'm thinking of one friend in mind. I think she probably thrives at home and probably does extra work, doesn't miss anything, and is a lot happier of a worker because she really likes her home time. But I do think more than half of people are not as efficient at home and are taking advantage of it, are being lazy, are not realizing sometimes that I think people don't realize they'd be happier going into work and there'd be a lot of benefits that they just don't see, but they really like not having to get changed and not having to commute. And for some reason, they're stuck on that. I do think the answer is like somewhere in the middle, though, where it's a little bit of a hybrid. Um, and I guess that goes to something I thought before of like you're saying pandemic's over, we're getting back to normal. They said this at the beginning, and I kind of believe it is like there is no normal, it's a new normal. And I guess like in this capacity, it's like we're not going to go back to being in person everything. We should start living our lives again. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
But I do think like, hey, um, we don't have to go into the office 5 days a week. Maybe like 4 days a week is completely enough, or three even. I also something like that does upset me a little is I think we do like travel a little too much, and we like I think a lot of people just do too much because of it's like an American culture thing of you just always want to be doing something fun and you don't want to miss out. And if you're not working, someone else is working. And I do like the at the beginning of the pandemic of like only doing essential. And we should do a little bit more than essential, yeah. But like I know some people who for the last 6 months have traveled every single weekend because they couldn't for a year. And it's like, yeah, you're allowed to do that, but is it really necessary? Um, and I like, can you be just as happy not doing that? I don't know. I think there were some benefits from there. But I think you're right. There's way more negatives than benefits. And it's weird too, I guess back to what Joe Biden said a pandemic's over. That pandemic's over, but we have a shitload of problems stemming from the pandemic. So can you really say the pandemic's over when we're still fucking nuts? like and like
Yeah.
when we still have supply line shortages and food shortages and like nothing is really too stable. I don't know. I guess like the medical part of the pandemic's over, but the repercussions we're going to be seeing for a long time. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Last thing I guess I'm going to say about this was maybe going to be one of the things I brought up, but instead I'll just do a quick little point about it. Back to like perspective and is something good or is it just like not bad? Is I think recently I also saw something, I forget what the exact stat was, but like inflation like dropped the most it's dropped in like 7 years or something. And it's like, or gas prices dropped the most they
Gas
dropped
prices, I think.
in 7 years. And it's like it related to inflation a little bit. Like, is that good? Or is it that just not bad? Like
Yeah.
I don't know. Seems
That's a complex question. And
yeah,
real quick, the one thing I find interesting about the return to work thing, I do think it'll be interesting because I think, there was a surge in remote work, and I think you're right. I think there's going to be a pullback from it. And I'm curious to see if there will be sort of like the people that are being like, I'll come to the office, like I have no problem doing an office job, if they're going to be able to be like sort of moved to the front of the line in jobs or
mm,
even sort of command a premium. Because if you work in an industry where like 90% of the people are being like, I never want to step foot in an office again. And you're the person who's like, hey, well, I'll come in, but I've got 4 companies that want me to come in. And so which one of you is going to make me the best offer?
yeah,
And at the same time, does remote work now maybe even have like part of your compensation, your salary might be a little bit lower because, hey, you get to stay home. We don't
right.
have to pay you as much because you don't have to
No,
commute, you don't have to worry about your clothes, so on and so forth. So I think it'll be interesting to see how these dynamics shake out over the next like 2 to 3 years, because I think it's going to take a while for this to sort of really shake out.
yeah, that has been happening too, and I think it's gonna depend per company, per person. But there's some places that cut people's pay because
Yeah.
they moved to a lower cost of living area. So they were making 150 grand in San Fran, but they're working remote. But then they moved to New Jersey, they're only making 100 grand because the company goes, you don't need that much money, you're living somewhere else. But it's like I'm
Yeah.
doing the same job. You get paid for the value that you bring to the company, not I thought that's what you should get paid for. So it's
Hey,
interesting.
look, man, you get paid if you work for a company, you get paid what that company wants to pay you. And like it's
Yeah,
this whole idea too. And I mean, I think more people realize this, the better. It's like, if you think your company cares about you, they do
yeah,
not. You are a line item on a budget. So as long
right.
as you're working for someone else, like they have no loyalty to you. You should have no loyalty to them. This is an exchange of labor for money, and
Yeah,
each side is going to try to maximize what they get from it. So, but what do you got?
that's it. Yeah, unfortunately, that's what it is.
Happiness rolling.
So yeah, this one I guess it could be seen as negative, but I'm gonna
Oh,
look at
Jeremy, don't bring us down.
no, I'm gonna look at the positive. It seems like, and the whole time this event has been going on, I don't know what to believe. I don't believe anything. I think both sides are lying. I think both sides are are lying because for a good reason, because they want the other side, whatever, blah blah blah. But Ukraine seems to be getting a little bit on the offensive in Russia. They
Mhm.
seem to be gaining traction on the ground. So, with that being said, is that true? I don't know. But what I can deduce from it, from my opinion, is we are making a move in the war, and it seems like something is going to happen fairly soon in the next, I would say, like 2 to 3 months. We're going to have a big development, whether it be Ukraine makes a big offensive and looks like they're going to win, or it looks like they're not going to have too much of a tough time for a while, or it might be Russia brings a new onslaught and tries next level tactics, whatever. But it's been pretty stable, or not stable, stagnant for the last couple of months of like what's going on, just a lot of death, but you're not hearing much. And it seems like things are starting to take a turn. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And I guess it's good timing for the winter because that's when a lot of people are worried about Russia cutting off gas lines and food supplies and all of that. So I'm hopeful that in the next 2 months or so, we have an idea of what might happen in that situation.
Absolutely. And I think I agree. I think these are positive outcomes. And I think, honestly, I'll be real. Like I didn't think that this was really possible, but I think the Western world coming together and funding this war, and look, let's call it what it is. This was a proxy war. This was all of Europe and America basically fighting against Russia using Ukraine to fight this war. like let's not shy away from calling it what it is. I think I don't necessarily love the fact that we were spending all this money while America is sort of falling apart in many other ways. But I'm also not naive enough to know that if we hadn't spent that money, it's not like they would have used it to fix Jackson and Flint's water
Well, yeah,
supply.
I just read
So
this. It's crazy. There's too much stuff that to read into, and I feel like I'm a fairly smart person. I have a big capacity for a lot, but there's just too much. I just read something that like there's a shitload of weapons in America that we produce that our army is literally not allowed to use, but there's like certain congressional districts or something that have all of the jobs to make
of
those
course.
weapons. So those congressmen are never going to say, no, stop making those weapons. So we literally are spending millions of dollars to produce weapons that we're never even going to be allowed to use. Yeah, we might donate them or whatever, but it's crazy just how much waste goes on, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all because of like greed. It's just straight greed.
Yeah, but I think so. The thing that I agree that these developments are positive. I think if I'm thinking about this from like a game theory perspective or a historical perspective, I think that, hopefully they're pushing him out. It's going to end. Russia's going to just retreat away with their tail between their legs. However, Putin is a madman, and I feel like we're getting into sort of like a cornered, rabid animal sort of territory now. Because I
Mm,
think it could be completely plausible that what he's doing is being like, all right, well, we're going to withdraw. It's going to look
nuclear
crazy.
weapon.
Well, that would be the extreme, but if nothing else, they're going to be, let them get comfortable, and then 2 months from now, wheel in the artillery and just start shelling the shit out of these areas again and start airstriking them again. But I know the Russians have lost a lot of their capacity, and hopefully that this is the end. But like, I don't think Ukraine is necessarily out of the woods yet. I wouldn't shock me at all if we saw some sort of renewed offensive push against Ukraine, maybe not even to try to take back the territory, but maybe just as a we're going to punish you one last time for basically standing up for yourselves.
Yeah,
And I think that would be evil and terrible, but I would not shock me in the least.
yeah, no,
But I agree. I think this is a generally positive turn of events, but I think that also everyone needs to like keep their powder dry and realize that like this thing isn't over yet. And like you said, with what's coming up with the winter, all of Europe and especially Ukraine, because their infrastructure has been devastated, could have a very, very, very rough time. And I hope and pray for a mild winter for Europe because that would be a blessing. But it sort of sucks that you're being left to really basically hoping that Mother Nature is going to decide not to fuck you particularly bad in this given winter.
yeah. I saw a bill in England for heat, and it was 25x from last year. So like you
Nuts.
have $100 bill last year is 2,500 this year for heat.
Yeah, crazy.
That's just wild. And then I guess I think I have a couple last things just to see what you think. Is you heard about the other war that just started in like Kyrgyzstan, Kyrgyz, whatever those, I can't say them, but
Are you talking
two,
about the one with Armenia
no,
or
no, Kyrgyzstan and like Tajikistan, two
Tajikistan?
like two like Russian type countries started fighting right now too. So it's just like that's not good, and you never know how that can play into the whole situation as well.
No, I mean the shit's
Oh,
wild,
oh,
man.
last good news. I'm sorry. This will be to end it.
Yeah,
This
so
is
on a
great,
high note.
great news of the last week. The Queen died.
Oh, fuck off.
But hopefully things change in the monarchy because I don't understand how so many people support it. It's not a good thing. You can't be born and people hate you because you're born just a certain way, and you can't be born and be praised just because you're a certain way. It's the same exact thing. So I don't know. I don't understand it, but for some reason people love that lady. I hope people start waking up and thinking like, hey, we should treat all people equally with love. But Queen is dead. That's not the good news. The good news is the whole procession is over and we can move on with life and not hear about that so much.
Well, Jeremy, while you're trying to end this on a supposedly positive note by dancing on an old lady's grave who had some cute dogs, I will end with actual good news. I don't know if you've been watching our favorite cryptocurrency, Cum Rocket,
Oh no,
but I would say that that Cummies are at an all-time discount, trading at 0.2 cents. So
nice.
if you want to get your cummies now, just get them and rub them on your face or do whatever you do with your cum rocket. But
Dude,
bye.
I'm buying some cummies right after this. The merge for Ethereum was this week, and that didn't go, or it went well, but price tanked the next day like 20%. Crypto, I think it's a good time to continue just buying $50, $100 a week just to stay in it. But it's definitely a low moment right now. So that was the week you missed. 2 weeks you missed because we're going to upload last week's episode. Also, great time. Next week, we're back to the world's coming to an end and everything is bad because that's the news. Dude, it was hard to think of good news.
It was tough.
It took me a while. I was like, I don't know if that's good or but I'm glad we did it. We'll do it every once in a while, but back to easy popular news next week. Thank you. Love you guys. Have a good week.